Nocturne was part of a now-defunct archetype of champions known as duelists, a group known for their penchant for single combat and/or assassination, primarily through usage of auto-attacks. As arguably one of the largest classes in League back then, every member was characterized by some minuscule gimmick that distinguished one from another. Aatrox, Fiora, Irelia, Jax, Master Yi, Nocturne, Shyvana, Trundle, Tryndamere, Udyr, Warwick, Xin Zhao. Just by looking at these 12 on screen, you'll notice that more than half no longer exist in the same way, with some receiving reworks that fundamentally transform their playstyle into another class, or an adjustment that's effectively stripped them of their auto-attack nature in favor of some other method of attack. As one of the few left of the old guard, Nocturne next to Shyvana and Tryndamere has been selected as a possible candidate for a visual gameplay update. In anticipation of this, I decided he will be our next topic for this series. Today we'll be discussing why no one plays Nocturne. I should probably start by saying that depending on your rank, this will come as no surprise or make absolutely no sense. Similarly to Garen, Nocturne is a consummate low elo stomper, taking advantage of iron, bronze, silver, and gold players' awareness and coordination, or lack thereof, to pick them apart one by one. Around that skill level, Nocturne hovers between a steady 5 to 8% pick rate as well as a commendable 51 to 52% win rate. A play rate above 5 would normally disqualify them from being a why no one plays. But as you progress up to Platinum, Diamond, Master, and above, not only does Nocturne's pick rate significantly decrease, but so does his win rate, to the point where in Diamond Plus, he has far below a 5% play rate on average and barely manages to reach a 50% win rate if at all. Seeing as I tend to evaluate the condition of a champion or the game from the perspective of Diamond or higher, as everything works in low elo in all honesty, Nocturne is most certainly eligible to talk about. With that said, what makes him a special case is that while there are very egregious issues negatively influencing his popularity, he also possesses one of the most impactful abilities in the game if used correctly, especially in an environment where chaos and discord lay down the law, making it somewhat unclear as to why he fails to garner a sustainable fanbase. As mentioned earlier, the duelist archetype consisted of primarily auto-attackers, with some kind of deviation or gimmick that set them apart from one another. For example, Jax has Counter-Strike, designed to shut down members of his own class. Aatrox was the Drain Tanker duelist with the Revive passive, Trundle stole your defense, Tryndamere was RNGesus personified. Nocturne's two gimmicks are actually dying ones in this day and age: Pursuit and Pressure. Nowadays, when you think of the word pursuit, you would picture anyone with a billion gap closes like Irelia, or an assassin who can rush you down in the blink of an eye and escape to safety without compromising any damage or effectiveness whatsoever. But Irelia is first and foremost a diver. She's really good at getting all up in your face, but after exhausting her dashes, she can't keep that same momentum on you. Same goes for Yona to a lesser extent. Additionally, pursuit, as the term implies, denotes an offensive context. Yona can use his dash abilities to run away just as easily as he can use it to chase after you. Pursuit champions are able to maintain a consistent level of tempo, usually offensively through persistent mobility or counterattack deterrence, both of which Nocturne possesses. Dustbringer fires a trail of black goo that grants them bonus movement speed and attack damage while standing on top of it, and if it hits an enemy champion, they leave a trail behind their location, almost like Singe's poison trail. So essentially, if Nocturne lands this ability on his target of choice, he will be able to continue chasing after them, and likely catch up to them even if they run away. That's the whole point of this ability, to pursue his target. It's one of those simple yet nifty interactions that adds a bit of flavor to an otherwise monotone kit. Shroud of Darkness is a spell shield almost identical to Sivir's, only instead of healing him on successful block, it doubles the attack speed bonus from his passive from 50% of max rank to 100, definitely a major buff. This also gives you an indication of the exclusive functionality behind his Q and W. Dustbringer and Shroud of Darkness can only reach maximum efficiency if being used for pursuit, not for retreat, as the Trail of Goo doesn't extend itself unless you're hitting an enemy champion, and the bonus attack speed doesn't mean a whole lot if you're running away. Unspeakable Horror also lends credence to this. For 2 seconds, he creates a tether between him and his target, dealing magic damage over the duration, and if the tether holds, the target is feared for up to 2.25 seconds. Once more, his E ties excellently with the rest of his kit. Dustbringer lets him keep up with his opponent unless they have a ridiculous amount of movement speed or mobility. Shroud of Darkness greatly weakens the response of his victim if they try to fight back, and Unspeakable Horror imposes a time limit for that counterattack before you get hacked to pieces for 2 seconds. It's a very straightforward yet dangerously effective win condition in the right hands. Even with all the 200 years champions that were pumped out over the past 2 years, when I think of Pursuit, there aren't many who can hold a candle to Nocturne in terms of the damned if you do, damned if you don't playstyle. Although there isn't a whole lot of competition in this department anymore now that Rushdown is the name of the game. The only remaining Pursuit champs I can think of are maybe Warwick and Olaf. Regarding his other gimmick, Pressure, I'm specifically referring to Fear Factor Pressure, as in the possibility that if you don't have clear and explicit vision of them on your minimap, you have to assume they can be anywhere. While there are a good number of champs with Fear Factor Pressure, almost all of them belong to old champs like Twisted Fate, Pantheon, Fiddlesticks, Shen, Nocturne, and so on. I know Shan, Pantheon, and Fiddle got reworks, but they came out a long time ago is what I mean. You don't see any modern champs with that kind of pressure anymore. As for Nocturne, his pressure has to be the most terrifying in the game, no pun intended. At the press of a button, Paranoia blacks out the entire map for all enemy champions. You can then select a nearby target to dash towards them. The OG jump scare right next to Fiddlesticks. Paranoia has to be one of the best abilities in the game. Everyone knows that if your team had full vision of the entire map, as in no fog of war, you have an almost insurmountable advantage over the enemy team. It stands to reason the inverse holds the same effect. If your team has no vision of the map or each other, you're in serious trouble, and that's what Nocturne's able to do. Everyone zeroes in on the semi-global dash from Paranoia, but in my opinion, the blackout is the real threat. Not being able to see where your team is means you can't respond to attack unless you're standing right next to each other. In solo queue, coordination is already hamstrung by lack of voice communications, making Nocturne the perfect solo queue champion, in theory anyway. He's had moments throughout his career where he would be a pretty serious threat. The most recent occurrence of this would have to be just after the Mythic item system, where he was one of the best users of the new Stridebreaker back when it still had the dash. His overwhelming advantage state combined with the stat-checking nature of his kit also made it difficult to stop him when he got a snowball going. However, Nocturne's popularity, at least for that moment, had more to do with Stridebreaker than him. Once the dash got taken out, his pick rate went down even without him getting nerfed. You would think with the very attack-heavy playstyle and global pressure on that scale, he would be used way more frequently. So why isn't he? And the more pressing question, why is he less popular in higher elo despite having an ability that should theoretically work better the higher up you go? The answer lies in adaptation. The hallmark of a popular champion is how adaptable they are. Seeing as no two games are the same, no two situations are the same, and at times you have to shift gears, whether to extend your advantage or to hunker down and ride out the storm. Lee Sin is the epitome of this. Junglers like him for having that flexibility in terms of mobility, offense, and defense. He can go full damage to assassinate or tanky bruiser for more drawn-out fights. This allows him to be very meta-agnostic, therefore a very consistent champion. Nocturne is a jungler/top laner who lives and dies by the creed of pursuit. If he's on the attack, he's one of the most dangerous champions in the game. But if he's running away or his opponent is confident enough to face him head-on, his pressure diminishes considerably. True to his theme, Nocturne thrives on fear. He's at his best when his victims are afraid of him and don't know the extent of what he can do. Dustbringer actively requires his target to move, usually away from him, so he can get much of the ground covered in that black goo as possible. If they stand their ground and fight, they won't be trailing that much. Unspeakable Horror is also a very inconsistent fear, as the tether radius isn't very long compared to, say, LeBlanc's ethereal chains. Most champions with the dash can just easily get out of it and go back in. Of all the duelists, Nocturne's damage output isn't really all that great even when he was at his strongest because contrary to what many people think, he was never a duelist in the same vein as Jax. He's a pursuer. Many fighters and skirmishers can overpower him in 1v1, especially if they dodge his Q and E. Not saying his DPS is bad, but again, it hinges on his opponent being afraid of him. Of course, any squishy backline carry will pee their pants at the sight of him, but anyone who can face tank his damage can easily stand up to him. This carries over to his ultimate as well. Ironically, Paranoia becomes increasingly less effective in higher elo, where players have a better grasp over their own mental and physical faculty and know what they can or can't handle. There's also the difference in opposition as you get higher and higher. More mechanically advanced champions like Fiora, Nidalee, Irelia, Akali, Samira, and such have a way better shot at taking down Nocturne than your Mordekaisers, Garens, Amumus, Malzahars, etc. Additionally, they're also more aware of the possible angles from where you'll approach them. Paranoia has a lower cast range than Twisted Fate's Destiny Gate or Pantheon's Grand Starfall because of the point-and-click nature of the ability. Even at max rank, Nocturne has to be reasonably close in proximity to his target, so it's rather predictable where he might be, especially in the mid to late game. That's another thing, in higher elos, it's less likely for players to overextend on their own. Even if someone is pushing down a lane by themselves, there's a good chance they're being shadowed by someone, and anyone who is by themselves likely has the means to beat up anyone who responds to them alone or to escape. Being mostly single target, Nocturne's team fighting is subpar. He can still behave as a typical diver and make a mad dash for the enemy backline, but if they're being guarded by a support or tank, it will be much harder to carry out your assault, bringing in another major issue. Nocturne's an assassin who has to build like a diver, that is to say he needs to build tanky bruiser items even though his job is to one-shot someone and call it a day. Having no form of defense aside from blocking one ability, he's gonna be on the receiving end of a lot of heavy fire. So if he opts for a Duskblade Axiom Arc Edge of Night approach, even if he does manage to kill someone, he's gonna go right along with them. The problem is he can't really afford to get by on his base numbers alone. Mind you, he still does good damage with Stridebreaker, Black Cleaver, and your normal bruiser items, but given that he doesn't have the same blinding speed as other assassins or divers, he does need to take his target out quickly, putting him in a catch-22 position where if you want damage, you're very easy to shut down yourself, but if you want durability, you give the enemy team more time to respond to you. Another reason for why he has to build Bruiser is because Nocturne doesn't do very well against tanks and juggernauts. Unlike other duelists, he has neither true damage nor % health damage. He also doesn't have any built-in armor reduction like how Olaf's Q shreds armor. Furthermore, his abilities don't really do a lot of damage either. Dustbringer has poor base damage and scaling. Unspeakable Horror has a 100% AP ratio, but you're not building AP on him anyway. And Paranoia's damage is pretty crap. He's basically all auto attacks. Now I know Nocturne gets a ton of AD from Dustbringer, but 60 AD pales in comparison to true damage or % health damage. 60 AD would be a lot better if Nocturne was an ability caster, but he's not. I don't want to imply he's bad or weak, but there are definitely games where Nocturne feels like he's a glorified Veer bot, such as if the enemy team has a lot of peel or if he's staring down a squad of tanks and bruisers. It's extremely easy for him to get screwed over by team composition alone, and once he's in that predicament, there's no alternative. Like I said, he's all pursuit. He's not really the best split pusher because to do that you have to either be really hard to 1v1 or really slippery, and he's not the best diver in team fights because he has no immediate hard CC like how Vi or Pantheon does. On the subject of pursuit, another issue with Nocturne is that he's an all-in champion. You either go hard or not at all. Nocturne doesn't really have the best trade combo since his trade combo consists of maybe Q and then auto. If you're committing to using your E, that's basically an all-in. One can argue that Dustbringer having a 1200 cast range and being AoE makes it a good poke tool, but the low base damage, scaling, and static cooldown of 8 seconds doesn't make it threatening enough for players to be scared of it. If you go in as Nocturne, you basically have to pray that you can kill your opponent before they kill you, and with you being unable to use either Dustbringer or Paranoia to escape, you have no choice but to fight your way out or die trying in teamfight scenarios. All or nothing champs are not played very much, as oftentimes you experience the nothing more than you experience the all. I guess you can say Nocturne is a living example of what happens if you put too many eggs into one basket that also happens to be going out of fashion. It's not really his fault per se. Back in the day like Season 4, Nocturne's kit was the stuff of legends. There weren't a whole lot of dashers, which meant not many who could get away from him, and the game was a lot less burst heavy, so he had time to do his thing. These days, everyone has a billion dashes, everyone does a billion damage, and the idea of chasing down the enemy team isn't as novel as it used to be. There's a reason Rushdown overshadows Pursuit now. There's no need to chase after your target if you just one-shot them right on the spot. That said, I don't believe Nocturne needs a full VGU. I think modernizing him with his current design is very doable, albeit kind of unoriginal. So you know how Umbral Blades makes his next auto attack do AoE damage and heal him every so often? I think what they can do is make it so it's like a Silas passive instead, where using his Q, W, and E stores charges of Umbral Blades that can be used in quick succession. This will accomplish two things: give him more burst potential, which he really needs, and give him an actual trade combo. There's plenty of cohesion within his moveset, it's just not good enough. I also think if they made it so Unspeakable Horror worked off a 3-hit active instead of a tether, that could work well too. You know how Xin Zhao likes to go Halo Blades so he can get his 3 Q hits off quickly? I feel like if Nocturne's Sphere was like a Kindred E where he tags them then hits them 3 times for the fear, that could drive home the fast auto attack fear a lot better. And while I know I said I hate reset mechanics, perhaps they could make it so his E cooldown resets if he scores a kill or takedown so he can affect another person, just to keep him going. Auto attack champions are known for being a constant threat, and Nocturne sort of isn't. But what do you guys think? If you have any suggestions on how to make Nocturne a more satisfying champion to play, feel free to share it in the comments down below. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, it would be awesome if you could leave a like and subscribe. Also consider following me on Twitter at Vars, joining my Discord server, and checking out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in the next one. Take care.